Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland, and you know what to do, folks. Subscribe, like the stream if you are watching live. Or if you're not, it helps with the algorithm. Rate us 5 stars on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast. YouTube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications. Hello, Bradley Alsop.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Yeah, the Knicks are a bit depressing. I am exhausted. I am mentally and physically exhausted. Well, physically, not to brag, I had a pretty good workout yesterday. But, like, I just can't do it right now. I can't do Rangers Sunday, Knicks Sunday, Rangers Monday, Knicks Tuesday, Rangers Wednesday, Knicks Thursday, Rangers Friday, Knicks Saturday. Actually, maybe it was the other way around, but you get what I'm saying. It's too much.
It's too much.
I need a vacation from my sports. And I do a sports podcast. It's driving me crazy. It's giving me stomach pain.
No, this is, I think, why, as I said I think I said this last week, is that it's a be careful what you wish for situation with your team being somewhat successful.
Oh, yeah.
Because the playoffs are not like an enjoyable experience, I think. Unless maybe you're like a...
Well, the Rangers, I will say, it's been a fairly enjoyable experience so far. But I still am racked with this anxiety about getting too ahead of myself.
Right.
The Knicks, it's more where I'm happy to be here, and I just don't want the team to be so injured going into the offseason. We kind of see the writing on the wall, I think.
Well, I think when you're in it and it's really competitive, it's bleak and stressful. But I think when it's not as competitive or maybe less turbulent, you're then concerned that you're almost like... you're jinxing yourself by not being as concerned as you maybe should be, or maybe think you should be.
Exactly.
Like if are things going too well?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's how I feel about the Rangers. We'll get to the hockey in a sec.
It's uneasy.
Let's start with the Knicks. Brunson is not himself. I saw some tracking website for ESPN that does like athletic analytics, basically saying that he's jumping a lot shorter, and that tracks with what you've seen, and the numbers of him being like 9 for 27 against Nesmith, I forgot how you even say it right now.
Yeah, Nesmith.
Nesmith,
yeah.
Jesus. He's like been defending him really well, and then physically Brunson just doesn't look like himself. We know he's dealing with that foot issue. I'm not moved by the Pacers. I think that Rick Carlisle effectively bitched, and he was rewarded in Game 3. Game 4, it's just against a team that really has nobody kind of left from an injury standpoint. Like, OG Anunoby going out, this is why he's my favorite Knick right now, and of course, Brunson is the best player on the team, but OG is unheralded in a sense because he's soft-spoken. He's almost Kawhi-esque in that way, and he learned from him perhaps a little bit in Toronto. But he's just the best defender on the team. He has the ability to turn it on scoring-wise, and this incredible physicality. Like, when he gets into the paint like that and he's charging towards the hoop, it's like terrifying because he's just such a big human and an athletic player, and he's one of the smartest players I've ever seen put on a Knick uniform. He just knows exactly what to do. So him being out like this, it really limits the team, and we already are down Julius Randle, like, the fact that the Knicks are in this position without Randle is incredible. And then they don't have a center coming off the bench, and Mitchell Robinson, Precious Achiuwa can only do so much. He's been, I think, really valiant in his role, but he just doesn't have the size to be able to do what he needs to do. And so and then Bogdanovic was supposed to be this phenomenal piece for scoring coming off the bench, who they don't have for the rest of the season anymore. So even if the Pacers do pull this out, I think they're going to get shellacked by the Bruins. I think the Knicks will get shellacked by the Bruins, but I think...
Celtics.
Oh, Jesus. There you go. Celtics. By Boston. How about I make that easier on myself? But I just think... Anunoby, if the Knicks were able to come back, has a chance to play in the next series. I don't think he's playing for the rest of this series. And that would be a more competitive basketball game, I think. But look, Halliburton's also dealing with something, it seems like, and he's found his game a bit. I could see this going 7 and it going really either way at this point.
Yeah, I think it's tough that, as you said, Jalen Brunson definitely doesn't look like himself. And for somebody who is both his, size and frame combined with the sheer amount of usage that is required of him, to not be himself, but to also still be relied on for to play so many minutes and to be the engine of this offense. I think it would only inevitably really wear on someone physically. So I just think honestly, this was the first game where I felt as if you were seeing the strains of fatigue from both Jalen Brunson and Dante DiVincenzo. Josh Hart a little bit, but like for example, some of the 3-point shots, for example, were hitting the front rim a lot. Like some of the layups weren't even getting necessarily as much like height or as much kind of direction on them in the attempt. Like there was just a lot where it seemed like even nominal kind of pedestrian basketball things were seeming to look very difficult. And I don't even mean that as like a slight. I just mean they play incredibly hard. They play an incredibly tenacious and aggressive and hardworking way of basketball, style of basketball. And when your resources in terms of players and is that already that depleted, there's not that much to rely on. So I was slightly nervous that even amidst this 40-point blowout that Tom Thibodeau was going to keep some of these guys in. He mercifully finally took out all of Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, and Jalen Brunson, fortunately. But knowing who Tom Thibodeau is, there was a universe where I could have seen it where he was probably letting them in, keeping them in a little bit too long.
Yeah, I do think he's evolved slightly, Thibodeau. I want to just give him credit for being a phenomenal coach this year. I'm in agreement with you. I just think he's also limited by literally just the bodies that they have.
People on the bench. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's just only so many guys. So I think it's a little bit like, I know I just see on Twitter everyone saying, oh, of course, Tibbs running the guys into the ground. And I think there's some truth to that. But benches all get shortened in the playoffs for every coach. And I think he would have had a lot more people in his arsenal, just obviously based on the situation. It's just not fair to talk about and I know that, whatever fans get, I'm a fan and I'm biased, but the crews that are calling these games are not ever giving that context. Like, and they I think that they're incentivized to want to make it like Knicks Pacers of old, and they want it to go 7 games, and so they play this stuff up. But you can't talk about the Knicks without the context of these injuries and everybody being so banged up.
And also as I said too, I think it's honestly to his credit that it was almost like less caricaturish of Thibodeau in that situation. Actually, he did pull them in the middle of the third quarter. He had basically the entire like bench mob come in. I'm a pretty fervent Knicks fan, as some of you guys might imagine, and even I was not fully aware that Shake Milton was on the Knicks.
Right.
And so that's when the real bench mob came out, because the game was sort of in hand, and which was like completely understandable, and I think the right call to give the guys who need to be rested the maximum amount of rest possible in order to be somewhat more rejuvenated ahead of Tuesday's pretty make or break game. But the one thing I would like to give the Pacers credit for, because as much as I am with you on kind of the
context,
the grousing of Rick Carlisle, because to their credit, the players like Tyrese Halliburton definitely were not following Rick Carlisle's footsteps.
I kind of like the team.
Me too. I
like Siakam.
I think they're a likable team. I like how they play. I just think Carlisle's a little bit of a red ass, and kind of can let his frustrations get the better of him, even if sometimes some of the mistakes made are not fully contingent on what he's saying, which is like getting a hard whistle. It's more, I think, sometimes his in-game decisions, which I have felt have been lacking in some way, even since he was the coach of the Mavericks. I think there's always been. That's also funnily enough, some is why I find him and Thibodeau kind of similar coaches, is because they have a very, very tried and true system of how they like to work, but there are always a few things at the margins in terms of their coaching acumen that I feel can be like exploited. Like one example for Carlisle is like, to me, it was in game 2, I believe, it was like baffling that TJ McConnell was having the absolute most success both defending Jalen Brunson one-on-one, but also getting into the lane off the dribble and getting into the paint for easy layups. McConnell sat the second half of the game.
I think I don't remember if it was ESPN or TNT, but they panned to McConnell like every single chance, every time that Brunson would get a bucket because he started going off.
Totally, because the game once it shifted to basically either Naismith or Nembhard. Naismith has obviously been having much more success recently, but Nembhard was getting kind of cooked by Andrew Nembhard was getting kind of cooked by Brunson at that and getting on that assignment. So that's just an example of kind of Carlisle's shortcoming, I think, as a coach. But I think, given who they have in front of them, it was very smart, both of the Pacers, to really, really knowing how depleted the Knicks were, up the pace as much as possible.
And they can do that. They can go on runs because they're offensively so gifted.
Totally. Yeah. And also with both TJ McConnell getting into the lane sort of at will, as well as Tyrese Halliburton really making anything he wanted from beyond the arc, it was just like a ruthless, like, unbeatable combination, especially for how tired the Knicks were in terms of trying to defend them. It was too easy in a way because the Knicks weren't able to withstand that current, and they were making shots where in the other games Halliburton was not nearly as accurate.
Yeah.
And I think the other big problem that OG Anunoby's absence is exacerbating is that there is not a guy on this team, unfortunately, outside of Anunoby or maybe Precious Achiuwa, but as you said, Achiuwa is more of a limited bench player who, by virtue of this circumstance, is being required to play more minutes and have more of an assignment. No one on the Knicks has the requisite like length necessarily to guard a guy like Siakam capably throughout the game as Anunoby does.
No.
And so
exactly right.
And so a lot of Siakam's like craftiness and sort of like driving ability, getting into the paint, sort of doing these up and unders that kind of almost seem to like defy gravity a little bit. He's just sort of a wonky player, but that's like what I think his draw is and why he's so effective. It's very hard to neutralize him without Anunoby.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I think that that's like what could be the thing that does the Knicks in at this point, because he's not even playing. He's doing work in the pool, I saw. And
it's tough because I thought when it happened, it looked almost like more like it looked to me. Obviously,
it could have been a cramp.
I'm not a doctor, but that's what I'm saying. I almost saw the way he was reacting. I kind of thought it was a cramp, but it seems to be.
Oh, it looks like a serious hamstrings pull, like a pretty serious one. I mean, I think they say strain, but he's not even doing work on the floor right now.
No, if that's the case, it's definitely more serious.
I hope he's. I hope.
But he was such an unlocking element for us for the team that I think it's just so hard to consider. Like, they've already had to re-triangulate so much of what they're doing on the floor given the limitations of the roster. And Anunoby was sort of, I think, the like kind of the buoy, like keeping this afloat. And it's hard to like further triangulate and further narrow their decisions and everything in the strategy without him as like a key factor.
Exactly.
It's tough.
It's tough. It's tough. They needed him as a defensive linchpin against a team that really knows how to score. They don't know how to defend that well, but they can score. That's why I think this is going to be more competitive than it would be if Knicks had a few more guys.
But with some rest, and I think honestly they very clearly shown it outside of this game. They've honestly, every game has been close and been kind of a dogfight. So I'm hoping that with a little bit of rest and a little bit of recentering, going back to Madison Square Garden, that maybe the tide can turn a little bit. But we shall see.
The other series that is getting extremely interesting is the Denver Nuggets just erased that massive advantage that the Timberwolves had. It was so nuts. I can't believe that they allowed that to happen. Look, I mean, it's not Anthony Edwards' fault. He had, 44 points. Karl Anthony Towns was
0 for 7 from the floor at one point.
He was had a very poor shooting night, and it just wasn't enough. And the Nuggets got what they needed out of this, which is Jamal Murray contributing. He hit that 50-plus point shot at the buzzer to end the half, right?
Yeah, well, so what's really wild about that sequence is basically the Nuggets. The Wolves had gotten it slightly closer, basically I think to within 7. And just in basically the string of 4 rapid fire possessions,
right?
The Nuggets got it to 12, but then with the Murray shot, the prayer shot that went in, it ballooned to 15 basically in a matter of 30 seconds.
Oh yeah.
So that just goes to show you how as much as it was kind of impressive, and it's still impressive to see the Wolves make the Nuggets look somewhat mortal on their home court, it also goes to show you still how the Nuggets, when they are really locked in, when everything is working, they are near impossible to stop.
Yeah. No, right. And the basically the Nuggets seem to be exploiting the weak side defense for the Wolves, and that is a game plan going forward if they don't adjust in that way as well. Because if they need to be able to adjust defensively to a guy like Jamal Murray starting to contribute as well, and Jokic even rounding back into form in that way, because if it gets into a shooting, an outscoring kind of competition, I don't know if Anthony Edwards can drag them over the hump by himself in that particular way, especially because Cat is so inconsistent.
And that's sort of what was happening towards the end, is that basically the only person keeping it somewhat competitive was Anthony Edwards. Because
Right.
he was the only one where it seemed like who could get into the lane or get a layup or a shot going, because even the guys who basically, in my view, with the Wolves, they have such a rock solid defensive identity, and they have such a good and as the X factor is so important, but if the marginal contributors start to either become net negatives, that's a huge problem, because then and what I mean by that is,
Yes.
Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker are both so crucial for their defense, but what's also really necessary for both of them, I think, to keep the Wolves upright on offense, is to ensure that they are making like 2 to 3 corner threes a game to supplement what Ant is doing and what hopefully Cat is doing.
Yeah, and
they
it's
were not
amazing.
able to do either of those. Like they were ice cold, both of those guys, throughout the whole game.
And it just was a little shocking because they have been so incredible, I mean, at balancing both their defense and their
Right,
offense, and they
right.
were so like historically good defensively in Denver for those first 2 games. So I'm not sure. You can just chalk it up to youth, or you could just basically chalk it up to not having the depth or having the guys show up around Ant at this moment. But Matt, our friend and producer, is a Wolves fan, and they are playing with house money to a certain degree. But I would be lying if I'm a little disappointed. I wanted the Timberwolves to kind of put them away and make this a really exciting West. But
Kind of like sea change moment a little bit, but
Totally.
from last season. But this was really the kind of marquee game for the Nuggets of showing what they can do with Jokic, because Jokic historically has had some pretty banner nights in one-on-one matchups with Rudy Gobert.
Right.
Because what Jokic is very good at doing is that, even though, of course, Rudy is imposing in his own right in terms of height, Jokic just has a lot of mass, and he can beat back Rudy. And when Rudy is
back in the Utah days.
and when Rudy is most likely expecting sometimes Jokic to do some of his, kind of like ballet footwork and handwork, almost like, his sort of like water polo esque, like around the basket work. The other thing that Jokic can do is, because he essentially has eyes in the back of his head, even if he gets into a matchup like that where Rudy is expecting him to go up, he can also just find a pass anywhere on the floor.
Right.
So it makes it so that sometimes Rudy is either having to go one-on-one, expecting a layup, getting beaten by Jokic's guile and his toolbox, but also he gets beat sometimes because he can't necessarily forestall every pass out of
Right.
every outlet pass or every
Right.
pass out of the paint that Jokic is going to do at that point also.
Totally.
So if Jokic gets him into that spot, it's either, is he going to fool me, or is he going to rocket a pass somewhere else and somebody else is going to score?
And he is just having he's starting to just kind of really feel in this series that touch to be able to distribute as well, which is what makes him again the MVP this year.
And there was one crazy one. I can't remember who it was to, but it was like he made it seem so, he teased it so prominently that, like, to the point where it almost seemed like he was halfway into his shooting form for like a hook shot or a layup, with like a fraction of a second moved his hand slightly to just do like a little touch pass
Right.
to somebody for a layup. It's like, that's almost impossible to guard, because at some point you're not guarding anything, because he's not actually doing what you're thinking he's going to do.
Yes,
like
yes.
It is.
You can't move your body
right.
quickly enough
It
to
is
accommodate it.
Totally. It is such a sleight of hand. It almost looks like a magic trick. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
You're thinking, even your mind goes to more quickly thinking, oh, it's a layup, but then it's already a pass.
Yes.
It's just it just the way he can his
hands. Yes, I was about to say that's why he can have such great touch around the rim too.
And the coordination that comes with it is just so incredible to see. But the other person I think that really came through so prominently, and I was even saying this to my friend earlier, someone who I almost think is like calling him a role player, I think is minimizing a little bit. Yeah, with Gordon, I'm almost like, is he potentially like? I think he's one of the best like rotation players like in a very long time, because it's not as if he's necessarily the star or the focal point, but his stat line, he fitted up that stat sheet so unbelievably in the sense that he was hitting shots from beyond the arc. He was taking basically every defensive assignment that was required of him. He was getting steals. He was getting blocks. He was rebounding. He's a great passer basically all around the floor. It's just so unbelievably valuable to have a guy like that who has a body type that might make it seem as if he could be either what you call, sort of like a tweener, or like someone who fits in between positions but doesn't have a defined role, which is sort of what happened to him, unfortunately, in Orlando.
Yeah.
He was sort of pigeonholed that way and wasn't utilized the way.
Even though he had incredible upside as a top 5 pick.
And you would almost think with Orlando that he was potentially like he had bust potential almost just because he wasn't being utilized properly. He comes to Denver, and with Jokic and Murray and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, they've just finally the Nuggets, like Mike Malone and that coaching staff, as well as the people around him, he's now in like a literally like perfect position in a lineup to do everything that he does well, which funnily enough is basically everything.
Yeah, right. He's how many tool player? What do you call it?
Yeah, right. It's in baseball like a 5-tool player.
Exactly.
Right?
But I mean, right. But and very specific to his role. So I'm interested to see how the rest of that series goes. The other one that's like really fascinating is the Mavericks and Thunder series, and it looks like the Mavericks are kind of starting to find their groove, specifically defensively, which I gotta say, we should probably eat some crow on some Maverick stuff. I didn't think that their defense would be this good, and I did not think that the Washington trade would work out as well as it has, because like with all this attention being given to Luka and Kyrie Irving is playing at such an incredible level right now. Like, I know
it's like some of his best basketball of his career, honestly.
He's a very difficult person at times to root for, but then at times you're like, I can't imagine not rooting for him because of like the way that he is and the touch that he plays with, his mechanics, his talent. He's just an incredible player.
We were talking about Anthony Edwards' first step.
Yes.
I also think that like one of the only really comparable ones in terms of like how quick somebody is Kyrie Irving.
I mean, he almost reminds me of like Aaron Rodgers in the way where it's like if you're a basketball person, and I'm more of, say a football person, right? But like people say Aaron Rodgers is your favorite quarterback's favorite quarterback because he's just that kind of like incredible flick of the wrist, looks so effortless in the way that he throws the football. And that's how I feel about Kyrie Irving in the way that he shoots the basketball.
And he does things with certain drives where it's almost like
and they're both anti-vax.
I was gonna say it's a funny comparison in more ways than one.
Yes.
But that he can drive into basically a thicket of like 3 defenders, go up and somehow like hesitate in air to then figure out where the ball should be placed to get it into the hoop. Like he is like, there are some things you watch him do and you're like, I don't know how it's possible for somebody to do that.
Right.
And so to see him combine, I think pretty well with Luka, but I think the concern I think for the Mavs is, although they've been having success against the Thunder, I think Luka appears to be slightly banged up.
He definitely is.
He's been expressing even that like his entire body hurts when he's out there. So
right.
Fortunately, as you were saying, guys have really stepped up to, augment the offense. PJ Washington is shooting the ball in a way where he has not even really been. That was not necessarily really his calling card in both stops in Charlotte and Dallas, where he's at his 3-point percentages in the regular season were much less. He was much less of a effective and efficient 3-point shooter than he has been in this series. But sometimes guys go on runs and you feed the hot hand, and that's kind of like why you make a trade like this to potentially feed and sort of like cultivate the upside that a guy like PJ Washington is very clearly has in terms of athleticism and skill. But like seeing him even hone in on something that he was not very, very gifted at makes them even more dangerous than they were before with just like Luka, Kyrie, and everyone around.
Did you see his dunk on Chet Holmgren?
Yeah, and even to then do something like that on a a 7+ footer is another like exciting thing to see for especially.
Yeah, Holmgren's been having an incredible playoffs, but he's not been offensively producing as of like the past few games as he had been at the early part.
These
of
are like
playoffs.
the first bumps in the road, basically for OKC so far.
Oh,
it kind of makes sense when you're going.
But it's everything we expected because of the size situation,
Exactly.
and it's why I think they would have a tough time with whoever really comes out of this Wolves and Nuggets series, regardless. Particularly, I mean, if Rudy Gobert is in there, that's why I'm hoping that the Wolves pull it out, just because I don't know. I think that they could have a good matchup. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm just rooting for them now that I say it, that there's no real rhyme or reason for it.
But it would be an interesting matchup, I honestly, on either end, like how the Wolves would either match up against Chet and how Gobert would match up against Chet, but also how both styles of play of the Mavs and the Wolves would be interesting, because so much of like I think also Luka's success outside of scoring when he's kind of banged up is also the kind of pick and roll chemistry he has with Derek Lively, the rookie, but also Daniel Gafford, another trade deadline acquisition. And so seeing how kind of Rudy would defend that too, I think would be interesting as well.
It's also like we talked about size being an issue for OKC before, with specifically within the context of Chet and like other big men, but it's also a problem, and it's part of why Washington is going off, is because they don't really have a power forward that's defending him in that same way.
Right.
So they're young and they're smaller, and it's part of what makes them so thrilling from an offensive perspective, and even some of those highlight blocks that you see. But they maybe just need a few more guys that can make them more versatile as a team.
But as you said, I think we were talking about this last week, where it's like the size discrepancy in terms of like Chet kind of being your big man, but then everyone being kind of much, in some ways, kind of significantly smaller. But because it's sort of a 5-out offense as a result, because Chet can spot up from 3 and drive to the basket almost like coast to coast sometimes. Chet's like athletic enough, I think, to kind of like even bring it up the floor, because like for his frame, he is light, so he's fast.
Right.
But however, with all that being said, I think almost by design, you're going to give up certain amounts of rebounding just because of the size and strength disparity.
Yes.
And if a team can kind of capitalize on that rebounding and get in transition, which the Mavs have been doing more, that makes it, I think, a little bit difficult to only sustain the offense when it kind of puts the stress when rebounding puts the stress on both the offense and the defense.
Right. Yeah, totally. And SGA is going to get his, but it's just about like, is it enough?
Is it enough? Right.
Right now, the Mavericks are playing better defensively. That's just
and I think that's really the key, because if they can sort of neutralize them to an extent, as you said, even if Shea is going to do what Shea does, if they can neutralize enough of the rest and kind of win the rebounding battle, it's a little, I think it's just like harder to see what the Thunder can do. But at the same time, I don't think it's necessarily over just yet, just because I think that because the coaching
I don't think so either.
The coaching staff in OKC is super smart, and they're just all very super talented and young, so I don't think there's like a real fatigue element. And Luka's just, I think if anything to really keep an eye on, it's just whether how Luka is going to continue to play,
how he's going to hold up.
Just because he seems to be just not having a good time out there.
Right. The final game or final series that we should talk about here before we move on to the NHL is I'll admit I'm really not watching much Celtics-Cavs. Like I don't care. The Celtics are going to win, especially now that we know that Donovan Mitchell suffered an injury later in the game. He'll probably still be playing again, but he didn't participate in the shoot-around today. So Donovan Mitchell's been really good, and I think the fact that they won that series put a little bit of those demons to rest. But the Cavs specifically without Allen. I mean, it's just there's no chance. I was surprised they took one in Boston.
But it also
But I think it's because Boston's messing around.
and also I think it requires it'll require sometimes like a Herculean effort by Mitchell to even like
Right.
steal a game. You
Yeah.
know, to even like and they won pretty handily. I just more mean like to even have that winning handily came from a really, really, you know, meteoric Mitchell performance. I just think even without Porzingis right now, the Celtics are just too overwhelming in terms of how they play
Yes.
team basketball. And
And Jaylen Brown's been playing really well.
right, and especially if Brown
Tatum,
is sort
of
of
course.
matching or even getting close to like Tatum's output, it's just
Yeah.
hard to like get past that.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I still think that Jaylen Brown really got a bum rap because of his performance last year, but he's been shooting like very very efficiently in this series, and this is just what the Celtics have been this whole year. They're destined to go to the finals. They'll beat whoever comes out of this Knicks Pacers series, and that's the end of it.
The only frustrating thing I'm seeing from where I see a little bit of kind of downside in how the Celtics play is sort of in what seems to be Joe Mazzulla's philosophy of like, okay, we have literally like 5+ 3-point shooters.
Right.
And we have so many, and we also have every guy who can basically drive to open up one of those 3-point shooters. So therefore, our offense can basically be, because we are all collectively so good at 3-point shooting, we can basically just dine out on like hunting three, which is like totally works when the shots are falling, but it won't happen every night where the shots are falling.
Game two.
Exactly. And I think if they could just lean into, you know, the like perennial MVP candidate who is strong, tall, has long arms, and it has an incredible bag of tools to get into the paint and either draw a foul or get layups. And honestly, there are two of them. Jaylen Brown can do the same thing also.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that, I mean, for my lips to hopefully Joe Mazzulla's ears, I just think that at some point, if the threes aren't falling, let Tatum be a battering ram. He has the ability to do so.
I know, but that's the thing is like I don't think that they're trying to play that game right now.
No, I definitely don't think they are. That's I think the problem is like.
But they can get fancy pants. Like I saw after game 2 some stupid overreaction on Twitter, but it made me laugh and think slightly where it said Jason Tatum is the NBA's Dak Prescott. And like, it's a little harsh. I mean, they've been to the finals. They haven't won one yet, but it will be interesting to see if he's the kind of guy that puts up an incredible.
So
right? It was good, right? It was
That's
some
so
New York.
funny.
It was also like a New York sports account, so they're just hating, right? But that could be true. I hope it is. I'm rooting against the Celtics, whoever they end up facing in the finals. But that could be it. And just something to watch for is a guy that, like, if you are that reliant on 3-point shooting, does that translate? Does it translate? Or are they good enough? Are they good enough? And, like, you know, or is this, like, Steph Curry in his prime? I don't know, right? But Curry had more tools in his bag and could reach into them whenever he needed to if the threes weren't falling, which was very rare. But
I think something that I pick up on, which is very vibes based. So I'm really only basing this off just like my perception, like nothing like statistically bearing this out necessarily. It's just that I sometimes almost wish I think Tatum can almost he seems sometimes slightly rigid in terms of like he doesn't also want to deviate from like the philosophy of the team or from the kind of strategy behind what they're doing, where I'm like, there are probably some moments where I'm like, when it's crunch time, like go like even if a play is drawn up, even if the vibe is sort of we're still hunting threes, I'm just thinking in clutch scenarios, I would still, even as amazing and as clutch as a shooter as I think Tatum is, there are times where I'm like, you can call your number and get into the lane, draw a foul, and maybe get a 3-point play.
Yeah.
And still have a similar outcome while also creating another headache for the defense that's not just completely expecting to be in rotation and following guys on the perimeter. But to your point, systemically, I think this offense will work in the way that Joe Mazzulla has sort of designed it to work the best with Kristaps Porzingis, obviously. And I think is still going to be a real key for them to going into the finals to have a real shot, is to have a healthy Porzingis.
Right. Right. Agreed. And that's, I think they're prioritizing that, and he should be.
Which totally, like, don't bring him back for the Cavs
Oh,
series.
no.
Like, it's
Especially again with Allen out.
right.
Yeah.
It's like there's no need. Like,
No. All right, on to the NHL here. Let's talk about the controversy surrounding the hit on Brad Marchand. Marchand, whatever. Sam Bennett, basically, from the angle that was shown on television, it looked like incidental contact, and that the Bruins were being completely silly about it. But then there was a new angle that was released showing that, yeah, no, he just extended his arm and he punched Brad Marchand in the face. He was out for last game. I know he traveled for game 5 down to Florida, so it appears that he has a chance to play. Although, again, like the NHL, if that was a concussion and if that's what took him out, he should not be playing in the next game. That's ridiculous. But they don't disclose. It's just upper body, lower body. I mean, whatever. They're stuck in the Stone Ages. But
yeah, that seems like a pretty clearly intentional hit.
it looks like it to me. And I mean, it's just been really, really dirty this whole series.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I thought because they're in the same division, it was a rough and tumble, like regular season series between those teams. They hated each other, and so I knew this was going to be physical. Yeah, I'm disappointed in the performances by the Bruins in the last few games, although I can't say I didn't anticipate it. I thought that the Panthers would kind of decimate them based on the talent disparity and the fact that the Bruins are just older and not as deep as they have been in years past. So I was surprised when they took game 1. But you all can also just chalk that up to the fact that the Panthers were a little rusty and the Bruins had just come off this exhilarating Game 7 victory. What was crazy, too, about that Marchand hit was that then in Game 4, Sam Bennett scored the game-tying goal to make it, I think, 2-2. And it was clearly goaltender interference as well, because Bruins crossed one of the Bruins players was cross. I think it might have been Charlie Coyle. Cross-checked into the goaltender, was cross-checked into Swayman, who is starting for them in the place of Ullmark. They're basically just riding the hot hand, and I don't know. It's worked out pretty well for them because he's played really well, and they're wasting, I think, his prowess so far. But regardless, Bennett then scored the game-tying goal, and then they were able to take it 3-2 at the end of the game, and it was pretty clear. And
yeah, I mean, he cross-checks Coyle right into Swayman. Like, it seems pretty.
So at the very least, it's a penalty right there that they miss. But then, technically, because it's his own player, there is some ambiguity, but it still can constitute goaltender interference if you push another player into the goaltender in an illegal manner, which I think it clearly was. So they're pissed. I think they have a right to be pissed.
I think justifiably so, definitely. Oh, not even to say necessarily as you were saying, I think last week, which is like, I still even think independent of this, the talent disparity is in favor of the Panthers.
Right.
But I think it's kind of hard not to feel a little bit like that this is a miscarriage of justice. It would be one thing if it was just the Marchand hit, which upon further review definitely seems intentional. For there to be then a potentially game-swinging next blown
by
call
Sam
by
Bennett,
the same guy who would have maybe feasibly been penalized in the form of a suspension or something.
Yeah.
And then it happens in the next game with another guy.
Or at least the goal. Right. I mean, it is right. He should have been. And so
right. It's sort of like why is there, you would almost then be led to wonder, like, why is there sort of this like impunity against penalizing
the NHL disciplinary process is the biggest joke in professional sports. I'm old enough to remember how lightly Tom Wilson got off for ragdolling Artemi Panarin and grabbing him by the hair, which could have literally killed him. He was saved by falling on his own leg, so his head didn't hit the ice so viciously after being his helmet being thrown off and then being grabbed by his hair and thrown to the ground. It's bad for the game. I hate this kind of crap. And it sucks because the Bruins have had an incredible performance by Swayman. I know that Ullmark was the subject to some kind of trade conversation at some point during the season, but he wanted to stay on the East Coast because of proximity to family I think he's Swedish, in Europe, and so that they could watch the games and etc. But there was it was potentially going to LA, is I think what the rumors were, and it was Knicks. So Swayman looks like he could be the future for that team, and he's been incredible. But Boston has been unable to capitalize because Marchand has been their best offensive producer so far in the playoffs. They're already thin. They're already a team that has a lot of experience, a lot of tough, great playoff hockey experience, but they are not getting any younger. And if they do deal Ullmark, hopefully they can get some younger assets to retool, because even if they end up miraculously winning the series against the Panthers and coming back down from 3-1, I just don't believe in them in the conference finals, regardless of who they're facing. Which brings me to the other team in the East, the New York Rangers, who finally lost a playoff game. They were 7-0, as they were in some other year that they don't want to talk about. And then they swept their first round opponent, the Washington Capitals, and they lost 4-3 to the Hurricanes in Carolina in Game 4, so they avoid a sweep. The Rangers had a horrible first period. They were just completely falling apart, not paying attention. The score was 3-1. I think at the end of the first period, the goal that Kakko set up to respond, it went 1 and then 1-1, and Kakko set up Will Cooley for an incredible snipe, which got me very excited as a Kakko fan. And Alexis Lafreniere was all over the goddamn ice. So like after the first period, the Rangers just they must have had a real talking to by Peter Laviolette, because they were not playing well. They crawled back into it, and it was 3-3. Lafreniere was just, I mean, his speed and his skating has really improved and was playing with a ton of edge. But in the end, the Carolina Hurricanes scored their first power play goal, Brady Shea, with around 3 minutes left on the clock, and they ended up winning 4-3. So I still have a lot of faith in the Rangers in this series. The Rangers just have a lot more tricks in their bag. And again, Sebastian Aho has been Carolina's best forward in this series, and yet I don't think he's been dominant. Like, the Rangers have had specific players that have shown moments of dominance. And the problem with Carolina, and this was the issue with them last year and why they have had such a horrible time advancing in the playoffs, is that they block a ton of shots, they forecheck a lot, they hit a lot, and they're volume shooters. So when you see these, like, Shesterkin's played phenomenally, but his save percentage is a little elevated because unlike, like, the Rangers have shot the puck way less on goal, but their chances, according to the advanced analytics, have been higher quality. The Carolina Hurricanes are a team that just likes to shoot the puck at the net, and Shesterkin has been able to get hot as the game progresses. It kind of feeds into his game. He's the kind of guy that when he takes shots earlier, he gets more in a groove and is able to be, better as the game proceeds. So we'll see what happens tonight. I don't want to make any predictions. I'm just thinking.
But it's a real real testament to I think it's a real testament, I think, to the Hurricanes in a way that, despite me, I totally agree with you that I think there is still the playmaking and talent and kind of depth amongst the line of the Rangers, I think still for me tips the scales one way. But the Canes, I think, are doing a great job of, at least even in the games that they've lost, they've kept them close. They've been very competitive, even though it's, even though yesterday, even though the last game, a 1-goal difference made it, because it's 2-1. Is that right?
It's 3-1.
It's 3-1. So it's like it could have been either shut the door or live to see another day. And I think we were talking about this last week, how that Canes sweep from the playoffs last year, they were still very competitive in all those games. Like, it was slightly closer in terms of outcome.
But they can't close things out.
But that's I think still that was the problem.
But this game they were
season.
able to.
And this is the one, even amongst two playoff series amongst two different seasons, where they could actually get one on the board in this circumstance.
I think that they have trouble elevating outside of their structure with guys that are just difference makers, and I don't think that's changed this year. I mean, I thought that the Rangers outplayed them for a majority of the game. The first period was atrocious, but they didn't score until right at the end in the third,
Right.
and they had a man advantage to do so. It was a deflected shot from the blue line by Brady Shea. So like
Like it was still pretty even,
Yeah.
regardless of.
I mean, I don't. I'm hard pressed to think of one game this thus far in the playoffs where the Rangers have been outplayed for the entirety of for a majority of the game. Like I don't. I'm actually kind of disappointed in the way the Hurricanes have played, to be honest with you. I expected more.
And I think we definitely expected more in terms of finishing ability with Gensel so far.
Gensel's had a really good playoffs, but he's just not like it's just not happening at the right. There's just not.
There's still an over the edge thing.
And Brandon Moore's been just weird in post game pressers. Like he seems jumpy and nervous, and it's interesting to think about like what can this team do? He's been a really good coach, and he won a cup there with Peter Laviolette as the head coach.
Right.
He's like, so integral to that organization, but is there a point where this gets stale?
Right. And I think that's maybe the question. Obviously, we still have to see how the rest of this pans out. But I agree that I sort of feel like we have gotten to this Hurricanes ceiling before.
Yes.
So it almost makes you wonder: is there something that like needs to happen to sort of maybe be a recharge or like a supercharge?
But we'll see. Maybe they go back to Carolina down just 3-2. So that will be determined tonight. You maybe already know the outcome by the time that you're listening to this. The other two series. Let's turn to the West for a sec because it's the same old damn stuff with the Oilers.
Don't get me started.
Oh gosh, because like the Canucks are not playing their starting goaltender. Demko got injured. Now they've been starting Shilov, who is for some reason playing phenomenally. He had over 40 saves in the last game. The Canucks were outshot by a ton, and still they were able to elevate. Brock Besser has been having an incredible playoffs. And the problem for the Oilers right now is that they are in a rut 5v5. It's all when McDavid and Draisaitl and these guys are all on the ice together and they can set up the power play and they have the space to do so. It's easy. The Oilers are just that skilled, and they're more skilled than the Canucks. But Stuart Skinner just got pulled again. And we're having the same conversation about the hometown kid
this guy's gonna drive me crazy.
Not being up to snuff. And I just thought...
I felt this way last year. I'm like, what is going on with
maybe
this guy?
It gets fixed. Maybe it does. Because I really did think that Knobloch has more of a system. And it's just a little bit more interesting there. But Edmonton still doesn't seem like they can get their goaltending situation figured out. I'm not that moved by the Canucks. I think that they're just happy to be there. They're a little bit ahead of schedule.
Definitely, I think for like a number one seed.
And
for sure.
They're not young. Like that's but they're built. They're at this process of like 75% of their rebuild in that way, or like they've gotten their guys like
sort of guard
Pettersson,
changing a little bit.
JT Miller, right? I mean, they have their core locked in. It's about building from there, and so they're happy to be there. The Oilers, it's like, what happens if they lose this?
No, it's like what
happens if they don't win the cup?
We need to get Connor McDavid to a Stanley Cup yesterday.
I mean, what, to a conference finals, right? Have they even gotten to one? I'm like, my brain doesn't even. I don't even remember.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't think so.
They beat the Kings like every single year, it seems, in the opening round, but they just can't get past the second round.
But if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure the Knights beat them last year. And I think both Cup winners beat them the last 2 years. I think the Knights and the Avs beat them in the second round.
Yeah. I mean, let's look it up here.
Because then I think a few of the first seasons, because they were so bad, McDavid wasn't in the
second. Oh wait, no, they lost in the conference finals to the Avs.
Okay, so they were in the conference. They have made the conference finals,
but they got swept. I mean, so it's easy for you to forget that. So they beat the Flames in the second round and then lost in the conference finals.
Okay, right, got it.
It's still like it's just not. It's to have the talent that they do.
That's the frustrating part. Is like to have like the generational talent and also the sort of the generational like number two guy. It's like not to be so Bill Simmonsy, but it's like you got Jordan and Pippen there in Edmonton.
I know, and then there's these like reductive hockey guys that say, "Oh, well, he's just." and maybe it's McDavid's fault. He's not the kind of guy that sets players up, and his game is more north to south as opposed to being somebody who is a forechecking player that can set up plays and make things happen. I just think that's so silly and reductive. I mean, he is not the problem, and his style of hockey should be in any kind of sane system or team should be elevated to the point where you don't even need to be having this kind of conversation.
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
That is so. It's like the same conversations we used to have about when LeBron before he went to Miami. It's like maybe LeBron just can't get it done.
Like no, it's not.
No, that's not how it works.
No, it's also it's not. It's like right as you're saying, like the idea of attributing a potential weakness for like on this Oilers team to like. Is like Connor McDavid a scheme fit? It's like, no, is the scheme a fit for Connor McDavid? That's the question.
Well said.
Yeah, does the scheme fit this god level hockey player you have? And if it doesn't, change
then maybe reevaluate the situation.
If it doesn't, change it.
Right.
Change everything. Like I feel it's getting almost like Mike Trout levels on the Angels. It's like
because this is the thing is like when fans are fans of, for the most part, there are fans who are like, we'll follow LeBron anywhere, but they are mostly fans of the organization. And so sometimes the stupidest ones fall into situations where they're blaming the player as opposed to, no, the Oilers have some problems in the way they've decided to build their team systemically. I mean, so Cleveland Cavaliers had their problems. So that's that. I mean, and it's just still 2-1. We'll see. But that was discouraging.
The other thing I'll say is I feel like there was a little bit of there was some nasty business by the Canucks in the last game. Both Nikita Zadorov planting Evander Kane into the Oilers bench and then holding him down.
Evander Kane, no love lost.
I was gonna say, if anything, I was like, honestly, of all guys for it to happen to, it's probably not the worst. It's Evander Kane.
I understand why you would want to punch Brad Marchand in the face. It doesn't mean that you should be doing it.
And not for nothing, I don't know if this was intentional, but when one of the scary things about that instance was Kane was upside down and his skate was sort of dangling. It almost looked like it almost made contact with Zadorov's neck. So I was like, so it just was all around like a hairy, check.
Right.
And then at the end of it, Kuzi and another Canuck, there was some extracurriculars where they sort of both from from front and behind cross-checked McDavid.
Right. And then like there was some scrum and it hit him in the neck.
Right, because he sort of fell down, and then the other cross check sort of hit. So there's definitely been some rough play. Yes, some rough play in the Oilers and Canucks series.
And we'll end with the best series thus far, I think, in the playoffs, which is the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche. These are two teams that just have great elements to them, and whoever wins, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. The Stars, I just thought they might show some fatigue after having to claw back from down 2-0 against the Vegas Golden Knights, the defending Stanley Cup champions. I mean, talk about battle-tested. The Stars have gone up, and in part, this is just Jake Ottinger deciding, I'm going to just stop everything. He's had a phenomenal performance, and the Tyler Seguin, I guess, had 2 goals last game on the Avalanche as well, so he's playing quite well. And the Stars, that means that they I guess because they started on home ice, so it's 2-1. It's that they get back the game that they lost at home, and it's also a testament to, I think, to the depth of the team and the fact that their defensemen have been playing pretty well offensively. Miro Heiskanen.
He had a great game.
He had a great
multi-goal game. Yeah,
he's been jumping up into the play, and he's been playing well as well. And then, the Onger took a ton of shots, but then in the third, they tightened up defensively, and the Avalanche were unable to kind of claw back into it. So the Stars have the depth. They are battle tested. This is exactly our analysis at the start of the series too, which is that the Avalanche have star power, but they and higher end talent. But Georgiev is up and down on occasion, and Ottinger's just gotten extremely hot. So, this is like exactly what playoff hockey is all about. And the Dallas Stars are the kind of team that scares the hell out of you coming out of the West. I don't know how you can't be scared of them. How you can't be scared of them right now. Underratedly good time to be a Dallas sports fan right now because of what the Mavericks are doing
seriously.
as well. But that's really it. I am tired. I had a lot of Mother's Day festivities yesterday, and all the sports, and
all the
everything,
yeah.
and I saw Challengers too as well.
There's just so much.
Which is
so
not
much...
a good sport. It's a great sexual tension movie. It's not the best sports movie.
I would think that Luca Guadagnino as a director would potentially minimize the sport angle and elevate the like sensual romance / sex angle.
Which I was all for. I saw it with my girlfriend. We're having a great time. Everyone's so beautiful and sexy, but the final sequence is a match, and they do some interesting things with the camera work that
Wait, is this tennis?
I was like, I can't follow this.
Yeah, it's probably the point
at all, which is probably the point. But I got to admit, as a sports fan, I'm like, if I can't follow like the internal logic of the game here,
like,
I'm struggling a little. And I grew up playing tennis, so I know a little bit about tennis, and so it just.
There are some hysterical clips where it's like, I think it was on Twitter, someone's like, what's the worst like depiction of sports in a movie? And I can't remember if it's High School Musical or another one where it's like the basketball, it's like the teammates commit like 8 travels.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like someone just stops dribbling for like literally 20 seconds, and it's like, okay, so there would be a backward violation, there would be a violation in the paint, like a defensive 3 seconds, like none of this would be allowed.
The other one, my favorite one is, and I had to look up what the name of the movie is apparently. So it's called The Duff. Have you ever seen this guy's throwing motion when he's supposed
I don't think
I'm gonna send this to you and you can put it up on the screen.
Yeah,
it's a 7-second clip, so like I don't think we're gonna get any kind of strike here, but I haven't seen this movie, but I have seen this clip circulated around. In part, like people will post this to make fun of, I don't know, a quarterback that doesn't throw the ball very well. Say this is Desmond Ridder or something like that. Speaking of, I got breaking news on my phone. Jared Goff has been extended. We'll talk about that later. I don't have time to analyze the contract. It could be totally fake and fugazi. But yeah, this is the throwing motion from the star quarterback in The Duff. Didn't think we'd get here.
Oh, great throw.
Great. Oh my God, he's got it. He's got it. Oh! There's no follow through. I got, like, you are supposed to put it in your pocket, in the opposite side pocket, buddy.
I love that it's like
You're not on mic, but yeah, no, it's. Oh, this camera won't. You're supposed to go like. Wait, I wish we had that ESVN football. I should give him.
Yeah.
You should go to a one shot of me. If you could grab the ESVN football, and I will show you at least what I've heard about the throwing motion here. Oh, he's not doing it right. Here we go. Thank you, Bradley. There we go. Oh gosh, we need to inflate this more. So high, and then to the other side of the pocket, not.
Yeah, it's like hot potato. He's like pushing it upward. It's like it's
right. Anyway,
and he's definitely saying something like, "Oh, sorry, babe, I gotta get ready for state. Gotta get ready for state."
He does, yeah. So what was he doing? Like he was almost going out like this. It's got to be like into the pocket. I can't. My movement's constricted here. So anyway, guys, with that fun little end to the show, we will see you on Monday.
Bye bye.